Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. And we begin in Venezuela, where President Nicolás Maduro assisted to the opening of the Bicentenario of Angostura 2019 military exercises at the Huaycaipuro military fort. The military exercises Bicentenario of Angostura 2019 started this Sunday and is an strategic civic military maneuver that seeks to prepare and elevate the operational sizing of all levels of the Bolivarian armed forces. It will begin this first phase at the center of the country in order to later reach the different regional commands. These exercises are carried out in absolute union with the people and with more than 2 million troops and militias trained for the defense of the country.
Today, the most important military exercise that our history recalls, the most important in the context we live in, have been successfully launched throughout the national territory. A real threat, the imperialist Donald Trump's government against the peace of Venezuela. We have been threatened by the head of the empire, and that has provoked outrage, rejection by all the people of Venezuela and the public opinion worldwide, and forces us to prepare to defend the right of peace for our country, to defend the dignity of Venezuela, its sovereignty, its independence, to defend the right to live in the 21st century as a free, sovereign nation. Our people and our Bolivarian armed forces are monitoring and defending our territory. They have been deployed across our homeland to protect it. I call the Venezuelan people and the youth to join this palm for national defense, sovereignty and peace.
Anti-mediatic pressure scenario is accentuated on Venezuela, and Venezuelans denounce that it is from the government of Colombia that a psychological war is being operated. But what is the opinion of the people who live in the border area between Colombia and Venezuela? Luis Tavera has the details.
In the international bridge Simon Bolivar, located in the state Táchira border with Colombia, dozens of people daily enter and leave for this place. The majority of them denounce that they are being used as an excuse of psychological war for direct interference in Venezuela from the United States.
I tell to the people of Táchira especially to think the United States will come to destroy our country. They are blocking our country. We have a blockade. We have to support our president. I am revolutionary and I work about my country.
Venezuelans warn that the violence manipulation is a component of the development coup that discusses itself as humanitarian aid promoted by silent opposition actors accused of committing constitutional offenses.
When we pass that bridge with the first vote, with the first stroke, the tyranny and the suppression is over and a transitional government begins.
But the popular rejection of those speeches of silent opposition is heard with more force. They want to see that the Venezuelan government tries to oppose the humanitarian aid, but it's an aid that is not endorsed neither by the International Red Cross nor by any health agency, even the same Colombia. Then we have to bear in mind that our people and the Colombian brothers, there are also against that they continue to try, that they, the people, are against the Venezuela. It's not the people, it's the government, and there are people that has been shown in various manifestations that have done here and in different parts of Colombia in support of the Bolivarian revolution and the Bolivarian process. The national government coincides that U.S.-led humanitarian aid only lends itself to a shell clipping. For no one is a secret that we have been subjected to 4 years progressively to an economic war, where we have to PDVSA banks accounts frozen, international transactions stopped. We have closed the banks to do paperwork abroad the world, and of course, because we don't have to deny it, it's a reality that has affected the quality of life that affected the tranquility of thousands of Venezuelans in various elements. Now, if we lift the penalties, we have enough money to guarantee food, medicines, and the supplies that this country needs, as there always was, not only for Venezuelans. I want to say, also for 5 million Colombians who have made life in Venezuela. The tranquility here is different from the one that shows some means of communications. They insist on continuing to live in peace.
And solidarity activities with Venezuela has taken place across the world. For instance, in Lebanon, demonstrators gathered to support the government of President Nicolás Maduro. Finally, they expressed their solidarity with the Bolivarian Revolution in Bolivar Square in the capital city of Beirut. Some Venezuelan flags were also seen in the yellow vest mobilizations in Paris. In a tweet, Nicolás Maduro expressed his appreciation of the internationalism between people. And the Venezuelan economist Pascualina Curcio has been invited to participate at the International Book Fair in Havana. While there, she condemned war, aggression, and violation of international rights by the United States.
Two big lies are being told around the world. One, that Maduro is illegitimate, which is fake. He was elected by 6.5 million Venezuelan people. More than 9 million participated in elections and 15 political parties. They were transparent elections with the same electoral system used for the National Assembly in contempt. Well, this is the main lies. And the other lie is that we are in a humanitarian crisis because they need to justify entering Venezuelan territory to the world using alleged humanitarian aid. We don't need it. We only need them to lift the sanctions, the coercive unilateral measures, the financial blockade, the commercial embargo to stop the attacks on our money and hiding food and medicines. That's what we need.
And a study published by the Latin American Geopolitical Strategical Center, CELAC, shows that the financial blockade against Venezuela that imposes the United States has been the main cause of the country's economic situation. Let's find out more.
Experience has shown that attacks on the economic and productive capacity of a nation are part of the broad array of options which imperialism uses when attempting to assert themselves on a sovereign country. Venezuela is no exception, as was made clear by the former U.S. ambassador in Caracas, William Brownfield.
At this time, the best solution would be to accelerate the collapse, even if it produces a period of higher suffering for months or maybe years.
A report published this Friday by the Latin American Geopolitical Strategic Center emphasizes the importance of the financial sector in strangling the economy of the country. In the case of Venezuela, the economic boycott has had very important consequences. Just in the period 2013 to 2017, the boycott involved a loss of $350 billion in the production of goods and services, figures that are equivalent to approximately between $12,000 and $13,400 for each Venezuelan citizen. Also, society was suffocated of $22.5 billion annually as a result of a deliberate strategy of international financial isolation. The situation has been frequently denounced by President Nicolás Maduro.
The people of Venezuela have suffered painful social injuries caused by a criminal commercial and financial blockade that has been aggravated by the disposal and the theft of our financial resources and assets in countries aligned with this onslaught.
The economic sanctions, the international boycott, and its consequences are elements very well known by the Venezuelan people.
The blockades against us isn't a secret. You cannot say a lie is the truth. The United States has blockaded us.
In the framework of the coup d'etat underway in Venezuela, the strategy chosen by the Venezuelan opposition in Washington has been to press the constitutional government through alleged humanitarian aid to fight the economic crisis that they themselves have stimulated.
It is shameful cynicism. It's atrocious that those who prevent us from buying medicine on the global market for 30 million people, who don't let us purchase food on the global market for 30 million people, come here and say that they have humanitarian aid for Venezuela.
This is what the Venezuelan economy has been facing in the middle of the attempted self-confessed coup supported by the government of the United States, which has attempted to create the conditions to justify an eventual military intervention.
Time for a first break. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and my personal account at Laura P. Telesur. Stay with us.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
And in Mexico, well-known journalist Jesus Ramos Rodriguez was murdered on Saturday morning in the Emiliano Zapata municipality in the south of the country. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Pablo Perez, has the details.
Once again, a journalist has been the victim of violence. This time, it was Jesus Ramos alias Chuchin, a radio journalist in the southern state of Tabasco, who lost his life in an attack in the early hours on Saturday in the Zapata municipality. Ramos was having breakfast with some colleagues when suddenly an armed person entered the restaurant and shot him in cold blood. He is the second journalist killed this year. Let's remember that during the Peña Nieto presidency, which lasted for 6 years, 47 people in the media were killed. In the majority of cases, they were victims of violence because of their profession. It's been related to their activity with regard to organized crime and authorities, or when they are talking about the interests of organized crime. That's when these attacks have taken place. Unfortunately, they remain unpunished. Giving more protection to journalists is a challenge for the AMLO administration. It's a vocation that has been so violently attacked in recent years.
Thank you, Pablo. And the Haitian President Jovenel Moïse has reached out to protesting citizens and the opposition, calling for dialogue. Protesters are demonstrating against suspect corruption and embezzlement of funds. The president said he is working hard to boost the food supply in the country. At least 10 people have died in recent demonstrations.
We went to elections. A part of the population voted. I am president. I am ready to speak to all my brothers and sisters about the difficulties the country is facing. To my brothers and sisters in the opposition, the door is open so as to reach a solution.
And now we go to Africa, where the 32nd African Union Summit has kicked off in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. In the two-day summit, leaders from across Africa will discuss reforms for the body and the establishment of a free trade area across the continent. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame highlighted the efforts made by the Union for peace, security, and integration. From this summit, Egypt will be the country that chairs the body.
Was to continue building a stronger and more capable African Union that is able to deliver on the pillars of Agenda 2063 and better represent Africa's interests on the global stage. The steps forward that were achieved reflect the long.
And our correspondent in Egypt, Nayara Tardo, sent us this report with details.
This Sunday, Egypt officially assumed the presidency of the African Union during the opening ceremony for the 32nd summit of this regional bloc held in Ethiopia. According to the spokesman on the presidency, Bassam Radi, during the ceremony, President Egypt Al-Sisi discussed with African leaders issues of common interest in the region. It should be noted that it's the first time that Egypt presides the African Union since it was established in 2002. The spokesman said that Egypt seeks to promote links with other African states, both at bilateral and multilateral level. This year's summit is carried out under the name of Refugees, Returning and Internally Displaced People, a slogan that was chosen because of Africa's effort to stop human trafficking and forced displacement. Among the topics discussed are sustainable development, regional integration and intercontinental connectivity projects, as well as efforts to activate the Africa Free Zone. The president also held a meeting with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali and Sudan President Omar al-Bashir to discuss the Ethiopia Renaissance dam built in 2011 in the Blue Nile the main tributary, and Egypt that has been traditional cause of conflict between the two nations. Egypt has expressed its concern as it considers that the filling of dams could reduce the level of the Nile. Meanwhile, Addis Ababa believes that its dams don't pose a threat to Egypt.
Thank you, Nayara. And the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres praised Africa for taking the path of peace and development. Speaking after meeting African leaders at the ongoing African Union Summit in Addis Ababa on Friday, the top UN official said a wind of hope is blowing in Africa.
Is a fundamental asset for the work of the United Nations in the world. And this is the moment in which a wind of hope is blowing in Africa. We have seen the reconciliation between Ethiopia and Eritrea. We have seen peace agreements that were established in South Sudan, in CAR. We are working together also to see if we move in the same direction in Libya. We have seen elections that people were forecasting that they would lead to a tragedy, to violence, and that in the end took place in a peaceful context.
And straight from South Africa, our correspondent Matuba Malaji sent us this report earlier today, updating about what the continent's task for strengthening peace and development are.
Egypt has taken over the chairmanship at the African Union 32nd Ordinary Session. President Abdel al-Sisi takes over from Paul Kagame of Rwanda. President Kagame leaves behind his campaign trying to strengthen the AU. Member states, although, have been resisting reforms that he came up with that would they saw them as giving the organization power and sovereignty over them. Now, Egypt is taking over the reins after its own problems with the AU. It was at odds with the AU back in 2013 when it was suspended after the country's army deposed Mohamed Morsi, who was the first democratically elected president. But now all that is behind in the past, and commentators say Egypt is very likely to focus on peace and security. As you may remember, Egypt is spearheading peace talks in Libya and in the Middle East. And so AU Chair President al-Sisi is in a strategic position at this point to advance those peace talks. But now with a mother body like the AU without real power, so to say, over member states, Egypt will have to be creative in dealing with the aftermath of the DR Congo disputed elections. As you know, that is still causing tensions even now. And the tensions again in the Sahel region and terrorism in several countries on the African continent. And the irony of this summit actually is that it's held in a country with the most internally displaced people in the world. That's Ethiopia. And so Egypt has its work cut out for it. Back to you.
An incoming chair of the African Union, President al-Sisi of Egypt, took over the role of chairman of the African Union, Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda. Al-Sisi was elected by members at the beginning of the African Union 32nd Summit, which is being held, as we were saying, in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa.
But in order to secure our place, we must face the world as a unified bloc and work closely with other regional organizations and the private sector to ensure that the interests and the rights of Africans in their own data are guaranteed. This urgent task is yet another reason why it was necessary to strengthen the African Union's capabilities. To fulfill our political objectives, we require an organization that is agile, healthy, and effective.
Time for a short break. More news when we are back.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
And we are back. The Syrian Democratic Forces have begun what it calls the final battle to oust the Islamic State group from the final bit of territory it holds in eastern Syria. Backed by airstrikes by the United States-led coalition, the Kurdish Arab Alliance has in recent months cornered the Islamic State group after a pause of more than a week to allow civilians to flee. The SDF said Saturday it had resumed the fight to seize the last 4 square kilometers of territory in the east of the country still outside of their control.
This battle will be sealed in the coming days. Most of the terrorists in Baghouz are foreign. In the last 2 months, most who handed themselves in or were arrested were foreign.
Now to Spain, where this Sunday a march of right-wing parties convened by PP and Ciudadanos requested elections to replace the government of President Pedro Sánchez. Protesters demanded the right to elect a new parliament and consequently a new executive because Pedro Sánchez came to power through a motion of censure and not through vote. In the proximities of Plaza Colón, the participants shouted their opposition to Catalan independence in a new demonstration against the situation of governability faced by Pedro Sánchez. And all of this takes place in the context of resurgence of the extreme right when there are few months left for municipal, regional and the European Parliament elections. And following the demonstrations called by different Spanish far-right parties, the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez accused them of trying to divide the Spanish citizens.
They are gathering against me. When I was the opposition leader, there were 2 illegal referendums in Catalonia, a unilateral declaration of independence and the application of the Article 155 that was applied to defend Spain, its unity, and above all, to restore the constitution in Catalonia. I always remained as the opposition leader at the side of the government. What I'm doing now as the head of the government and always respecting the constitution is to solve a crisis that the right wing aggravated while in power for the last 7 years.
And former President of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, has spoken about the protests on social media. He said that more people demonstrated in favor of Catalan independence from Spain than for the unity of the Spanish state. The protests came at a delicate moment as the trial of the leaders of the Catalan independence movements begins this week. And in Italy, farmers have protested for a third consecutive day against the unfair value of dairy items. Protesters in the island of Sardinia blocked the port to prevent the arrival of trucks from mainland Italy. They also spilled milk as a way of protest.
We want a fair price. If we are not paid €1 more per liter, we will be in a war until 2021, until we can produce. Now here, I feed factories, and tomorrow they will stop their production in solidarity with us.
Like this, we've come to the end of this brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net, where of course you can find opinion articles, our special interviews, and many more information. Continue with Telesur, connecting the global south. Until next time, thank you for watching.